So today is officially a taking recommendations day. So I'm gonna just kind of start going, and if someone comes in here with a recommendation, then we'll take it up. So okay, this is what we've been reading. I kind of finished it out, but we could read the conclusion that just kind of tells us where we were at, right? So we got the comprehensive structural analysis of human cognitive architecture demonstrates irrefutably that the vast majority of human experience, perception, and behavior is governed by an intricate layered matrix of intrinsic automatic processing rules, rooted deeply in the biological imperatives of survival and optimized through the uncompromising mechanisms of evolutionary ecology. These algorithms ensure that the organism interacts with an infinitely complex world rapidly, successfully, and without exceeding the extraordinarily narrow constraints of working memory. From the foundational compilation of cognitive schemas into autonomous procedural memory loops to the rapid bottom-up capture of visual attention by salient gestalt forms, automaticity represents the brain's primary default operating system. The architecture relies on the ventromedial prefrontal cortex to generate precognitive somatic markers that ruthlessly trim the decision space while simultaneously deploying ecologically rational heuristics that execute complex statistical categorizations seamlessly. In the social realm, dedicated neural networks rapidly extract hierarchical status from facial cues, compute the unobservable mental states of others via probabilistic Bayesian inversion, and execute intuitive moral appraisals that continuously navigate the tension between individual action and group welfare. Ultimately, conscious, deliberate reasoning, the hallmark of biologically secondary cognition, does not function independently of this massive underlying structure. Rather, it operates on a unified model, utilizing the exact same processing rules and algorithms as our intuitive judgments, functioning primarily as an executive arbiter designed to override implicit biases only when confronting unprecedented environmental novelty or irresolvable internal conflict. Jesus, was that all one sentence? Oh, here. Understanding this exhaustive structural map of automaticity provides a profound behavioral blueprint, revealing that human rationality is not defined by the absence of heuristics, but by their exquisite, automatic, and continuous adaptation to the structure of the world. Yo, Darmadam, what's good? We are so out here. We are out here every day. We're grinding. We're learning. All right, we got our next one. Now I'm gonna just kind of go through this, but if anyone, if you Darmadam have any recommendations, feel free, and we could work through those. We could also go through the summary of this video actually at some point. Perhaps if this is a slog, we can do it sooner rather than later. Okay, so I already got this stuff down, right? The human mind is fundamentally an evolutionary artifact, calibrated not for the pursuit of objective truth, abstract mathematical perfection, or classical economic rationality, but for the ruthless maximization of biological fitness within the ancestral environment. Having established the neurobiological baselines of autonomic regulation, homeostatic drives, and reflexive responses. So this is referring to what we've already done in our automatic behaviors. It's like reacting to the prompt here. A comprehensive functional analysis of human agency must descend to the psychological and cognitive layers. Here, automatic behaviors manifest as complex cognitive heuristics, deep-seated social drives, and systematic cognitive biases. To understand these mechanisms, one must abandon the pervasive modern assumption that deviations from formal logic represent structural flaws or computational errors in human cognition. Instead, these psychological phenomena are the enduring legacy of the Pleistocene brain, operating within the entirely novel, radically accelerated architecture of the modern Anthropocene. Anthropocene? This report provides an exhaustive functional analysis of evolutionary instincts, social drives, and cognitive heuristics. It examines the precise reasons why these automated scripts were naturally selected, how they serve to mitigate the specific environmental pressures of our evolutionary past, and how they currently function as highly efficient, though occasionally catastrophically mismatched, shortcuts in modern socioeconomic, digital, and financial ecosystems. Whew. All right, I think I'm going to be going rapid fire here. The epistemology of bounded cognition and ecological rationality. For several decades, the dominant paradigm in cognitive psychology and behavioral economics, pioneered most notably by Tversky and Kahneman, viewed cognitive heuristics as inferior shortcuts that inevitably lead to systematic biases and irrational errors. In this established framework, often termed the heuristics and biases program, the human mind is perceived as a flawed information processor that routinely violates the fundamental axioms of probability and expected utility theory. This view argues that human cognition relies excessively on a fast, automatic, and emotionally driven System 1, which frequently overrides the deliberate, logical, and computationally expensive System 2, leading to suboptimal decision-making in modern contexts. However, I do actually want to write this stuff down. This is stuff I would like to mention. I think even though we could go two ways. We could not mention Kahneman and System 1, System 2 at all, and that works because System 1 and System 2, this whole idea, this dichotomy is flawed. However, we want to give something for the readers to be able to integrate within their current understanding, and they probably already understand these System 1, System 2 models, thinking fast and slow. So at least this gives them a way to connect that in. However, an evolutionary functional analysis demands a radical paradigm shift toward the concept of ecological rationality, a theoretical framework rooted in Herbert Simon's early theory of bounded rationality and extensively developed by researchers such as Gerd Gigerenzer. We talked about him yesterday. From this adaptationist perspective, the human mind is remarkably well designed for solving the specific problems of survival and reproduction. It is equipped with an adaptive toolbox of fast and frugal heuristics. These heuristics do not represent cognitive laziness, nor are they a failure of logic. Rather, they are highly sophisticated evolutionary adaptations designed to operate in specific. So I would always just say evolutionary products, because we don't know which aspects of these are adaptations versus which are just kind of exaptations or spandrels, which are just brought along for the ride, or perhaps now they have a function that they used to not have. Rather, they are highly sophisticated evolutionary products designed to operate in specific, uncertain environmental structures where time, computational capacity, and available information are inherently strictly limited. Yikes. Okay, there's no way I wrote that before, right? Or copied that before, right? Limited. All right. Ecological rationality aims to identify the specific environmental properties that permit the simplification of a decision strategy and to ascertain the potential price of that simplification. When an organism faces an immediate threat or a fleeting opportunity, gathering exhaustive data to compute optimal probabilities is an evolutionary death sentence. The mind must satisfice. What is that? Satisfice. Accept an available option as satisfactory. Wow. I've never heard that.
Satisfice.
Okay. Must use cognitive rules of thumb that are good enough to secure survival. Thus, irrationality cannot be judged in a vacuum. A heuristic is ecologically rational if its underlying cognitive architecture fits the structure of the environment in which it is deployed. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to go too far into ecological rationality. I'm not a fan of the way that it's defining rationality in this case, because it's so retrospective and retroactive too. Given that you could do something that you initially thought was not successful, and then you find out that it was actually it had a better outcome than you expected, so you retroactively define it in more success than you originally defined it. So I'd rather just point out, hey, like these are things that we can interpret after the fact. But here we go. Here we go. The quickest way to enlightenment. All right, we'll do that next. Let's do that. Oh, does this not give us numbers? Lame. Deep rationality. All right, let's do it before we start deep rationality. So we just have two small sections. Okay, the bias variance dilemma and the efficacy of ignorance. The mathematical efficiency of cognitive heuristics can be formally understood through the statistical principle known as the bias variance trade-off in environments characterized by extreme uncertainty, noisy data, and small sample sizes, conditions that perfectly describe the ancestral foraging environment of the Pleistocene epoch. Complex predictive models that attempt to incorporate every available variable suffer from extraordinarily high variance. These complex models inevitably overfit to the idiosyncratic noise of past data, resulting in massive prediction errors when they are applied to novel, untested situations. Okay, that's probably worth saying. Not in that same way. I would want to simplify that. I could probably simplify that in a single sentence. To optimize survival, evolutionary pressures sculpted human cognition to favor... So we got to be very careful. There's no... Evolution's not sculpting in any direction. This is a retrospective interpretation of how things have gone. But we're saying, hey, this human cognition ended up seemingly favoring simple, robust heuristics that deliberately ignore large swaths of available information. By relying on fewer parameters, these fast and frugal heuristics introduce a cognitive bias, but they drastically and simultaneously reduce variance. So the idea that there's like a cognitive bias introduced is also really weird. Like the cognitive bias is the thing that we rely on. It is the bedrock. It is our foundation, and only in our culture are we identifying this thing as a cognitive bias because it makes us act in ways that we perceive to be ill-fitted to the moment. But they drastically and simultaneously reduce variance. The mathematical consequence of this trade-off is often a significantly lower total prediction error. This phenomenon is known as the less is more effect, demonstrating unequivocally that computational and informational simplicity can yield surprisingly superior outcomes compared to complex, data-hungry, rational models that attempt to compute optimal choices. A prime example of this is the recognition heuristic, which dictates that if one of two objects is recognized and the other is not, the mind automatically infers that the recognized object has the higher value with respect to the immediate criterion. In the ancestral environment, recognizing a food source or face was a highly reliable proxy for safety or social value. In a modern context, this automated script remains remarkably robust. For instance, an amateur investor utilizing the recognition heuristic to select a portfolio of recognizable corporate stocks frequently outperforms complex mathematical market weighting strategies managed by experts precisely because brand recognition correlates highly with market viability and corporate size. The heuristic is ecologically rational because it effortfully exploits the pre-existing structure of the information environment. Similarly, the take the best heuristic, which makes decisions based solely on the single most valid cue while ignoring all others, proves highly effective in specific environments where cues are highly correlated. Okay. I'm going to just gank this. I'm going to find recognition heuristic, which we have a few of these. Oh, did I not actually? Huh. Okay. This is all, okay, ecological rationality. Okay, we can sift through that. Tomorrow I'm probably going to do a ton of organization. I wonder if that's the way to go about this given my time constraints, to just during the week come up with a lot of notes And then during the weekend, all I do is organize and put stuff together. So we'll see that. We'll see if I could do that tomorrow. The frequentist hypothesis in the format of probability. The cognitive architecture of statistical inference further illustrates the exquisite adaptation of the human mind to its ancestral environment. Cognitive scientists frequently observe that the human mind fails profoundly at Bayesian probability tasks when data is presented in the form of single event probabilities or abstract percentages. This has historically been cited as proof of human irrationality, exemplified by phenomena such as base rate neglect or the conjunction fallacy, where individuals irrationally judge the probability of a conjunction, like Linda is a bank teller and a feminist, as a higher than a single constituent. Linda is a bank teller. Okay, I'm gonna have to learn more about that one. Out of curiosity, would you be willing to give your perspective on an article on Time? And please don't dismiss it out of hand. Perhaps, but we are somewhat backed up. I could do it in between these two. So we're looking at like in 30 minutes. But then also, I should say, I don't know, I'll just leave it there. All right, however, according to the frequentist hypothesis, human inductive reasoning mechanisms do possess a highly sophisticated calculus of probability, but they were evolutionarily designed to take natural frequency information as input and produce natural frequencies as output. In the Pleistocene epoch, Pleistocene? Humans did not encounter abstract percentages. They encountered sequential frequency encoded events in physical space over time. 3 out of the last 20 visits to this river bend resulted in predator attacks. The neural circuitry of the human brain is optimized to tally these discrete occurrences. Extensive research has demonstrated that when modern complex probability problems are reframed from abstract percentages into natural frequencies, cognitive illusions and errors like base rate neglect largely disappear. This proves that the underlying statistical algorithm is functionally intact, but it requires an ecologically valid data format to execute it properly. The error lies not in the mind's architecture, but in the mismatch between the mind's expected input format and the artificial presentation of modern statistical data. That's really cool. Okay, that's where we're gonna chill on that, and then we're gonna watch this, and then we are going to come on. There we go. And then we were going to read this article. Only fun learning. True. Einstein didn't think time was an illusion. Is it just that? I don't know. There's this, how am I supposed to read this? I'm not a subscriber here. We can only get that far. All right, here we go.
Sometimes people ask me, is there a really quick way to enlightenment? There's got to be a quicker way. A lot of you know what's coming because this is a standard story that I tell, which is...
Well, I just can't put it in. I can't get the text. I mean, like, I don't know if this is actually giving me everything below. I don't think it is. I can't get the text to summarize it. Why, if you can't read it, then why would you want me to go through it?
Going on a tour.
Oh, wrong one. Oh, I read it. Okay. You have an account for that?
Well, are you sure you want to know?
Yikes.
Maybe you won't like what you hear. Yeah, I can tell you some pretty quick ways to transform deeply. Strong determination sitting. It's a classic. I won't say that every master has done it, but I would say that the great majority of people that come to the master level on this path. I've done a lot of strong determination sitting. So what does that mean? That means that you sit down and you say, okay, for the next hour or the next 90 minutes or 2 hours or 3 or 4 or whatever, 3 days, not going to voluntarily move.
3 days. Do people do that? Do they starve themselves? This video influenced my practice a lot. Nice. Hell yeah.
I know the prospect of something like that seems horrific. You might not imagine yourself doing that. Well, first of all, I said it could just be an hour or 90 minutes, okay? It doesn't have to be 3 days. Secondly, even if it was 4 hours or 8 hours, this is not so extravagantly unrelated to experiences that normal human beings have. In fact, I would suggest to you that
train the mind to observe intense physical and mental phenomena without reacting. Decouple the physical sensation of pain from the psychological suffering.
Get what I'm talking about? Okay. Sitting for 8 hours and breaking through a posture is not more intense than giving birth to a baby. If you've done that, okay. Now, of course, it's a different circumstance. So, I mean, first of all, there's no way out. Secondly, there's a lot to distract, and yes, nowadays there are medications and so forth. But the way most people had to give birth to babies for most of humanity's history, I think it was nature's way to bring that person to a permanent transcendence. Sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I'm scared because sometimes I'll get bouts of this even in my in my 18-minute session. And fortunately, I'm noticing, you know, that pattern of behavior that it talks about of the suffering there, or of the pain. But yeah, going that much longer would be really difficult for me, of course. But I think that's the point. Basically, the argument is that relativity of simultaneity is compatible with an asymmetric arrow of time, because while there is no absolute now to which all nows refer, within frames of reference there are nows which are distinct from past and future. Okay. That's one of those things that I would think is like, it's cool, but I don't think we can do anything with it. You know, I'm not sure if it's important for us to spend much time on it, because it's not that practical. It's just an interesting way of thinking about the physics, and it might be a right way. It might be a good way to think about physics, but it doesn't really help us.
Maybe of the source, expanding and contracting. It's interesting, I talked about the Sundance yesterday, Native people. So the story that's told among the Lakota Sioux is that originally Sundancing was for men only. Nowadays it's women, even children, actually. The men wanted to know what it was like to give birth. So if you look at the symbolism of the Sundance, the men wear skirts like women, and you're attached.
He does seem very excited about
pierced,
the subject matter, of
which
course.
Which is symbolic of the umbilical cord. And then you have to break loose, and that's like, you know, being born, etc., like a new birth. Actually, in the old days, after their 4th year of Sundancing, they considered that they had died and were a completely new person. And they actually gave away all their possessions, like everything. All their teepees and ponies and everything, and they just like started from scratch as a new person. Okay, so even though it sort of sounds like really far out there, it's actually no more than what at least half of humans do, okay? And the good news is, strong determination sitting, you can gradually work up to. You train yourself slowly to be able to do this kind of thing. So there's one absolute rule do not physically damage the body. So how are you going to know if you're physically damaging the body? Well, remember, you gradually train yourself to do this, right? It's a slow training. So you sit for an hour, you got some pain, you get up, it goes away, you're okay, you haven't damaged the body. Then, you know, you add 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and as long as you're getting up and, you know, after a few minutes you're okay, then you're okay. I can assure you that with rare exceptions, most people can sit down for 4 hours and not move and get up, and they haven't like damaged any joints or anything like that. But you gradually sort of learn how to do this. Oh, by the way, your legs falling asleep isn't going to damage anything. And it's not, you're not cutting off circulation so much, it's more pressure on nerves that causes that paresthesia thing. And that, as you've noticed, disappears as soon as you get up. There might occasionally be exceptions where people have neurological or circulatory issues. So if you wonder about that, check it with a doctor. But usually it's not that big a deal. The main danger in your legs falling asleep is not massive necrosis that you might be fantasizing. It's the tissues are dying. You know. Main danger is if you try to get up too quickly, your legs will not hold you and you'll fall. I've seen some really far out, you know, people that didn't know that, like in Zen, and like the clackers go, you know, and it's like, okay, everybody jumps up and they just like do a somersault across the Zendo, you know. So, yeah, you have to get up slowly. So, what's involved in a strong determination sitting? Well, you're going to have 4 things arise. You're going to have physical sensations, and those are going to get more and more and more intense, for sure. And then you're going to have your thoughts and emotions, and your will and your desire and your judgments arising moment by moment, reactively to that.
Gemini's telling us
So
we're going to have physiological
that's the whole
damage.
Mind, body, self. That's why, if you can have a complete experience of that, it's a powerful transcendence, and that's why, as I say, not everyone that becomes a master, but in Asian style training, awful lot of people that become masters, they do this. So, so what's going to happen? Well, you start to get physical discomfort. Now, what I usually do, this is my own personal strategy. You'll find whatever strategy works for you if you decide to do things like this. But my personal strategy is to start by detecting the global spread of the pain rather than going immediately to the local intensity. That's sort of the sensory clarity skill. After you get really intimate with the body, you realize that the body is like a pond, and not always, but quite often, when there's a local physical or emotional splash, there's a global ripple. And one of the options within the noting apparatus is what I call zooming. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can zoom both ways. So zooming both ways means that you thrust your attention into the local splash, so that's contracted, but at the same time you spread your attention over the whole body. So you sort of zoom in and out at the same time. Now what that does
I'm going to try this out.
is that greases the rails, so to speak, for sensations to dissipate in the volume of the body. It's analogous to Boyle's law in physical chemistry. Pressure is inversely proportional to volume. If pressure is analogous to suffering. So here's how that works. So when you zoom into a local intensity, of course that becomes very salient. It intensifies even more. But at the same time you're zooming out. Now one of 2 things will happen. Either there will be conscious sensations that are spreading from that local intensity, and with the zooming out you'll be able to detect that and open up to it and facilitate that. The other possibility is that actually there aren't conscious spreading sensations. And that's fine. It's not always the case that there are conscious spreading sensations. But it is almost always the case, with rare exception, that there are subconscious spreading sensations going on. Now, an important principle in mindfulness is we only ask you to attend to what is available in conscious experience. But So don't worry if you don't detect any of that subliminal spread. But here's the subtlety of the technique.
This is kind of
So
his area of expertise.
cleverness
Okay,
of
nice.
the
Oh, on chronic
option.
pain management. Oh, that's really cool.
If you spread your awareness over the whole body, zoom out while you zoom in, then even if there's not a conscious awareness of the spread of the sensation, the movement of your attention over the whole body greases the rails for the subconscious processing to spread without impedance. So you may not consciously be aware, but you're giving the very subtle spreading tendencies of the body what they need to dissipate the density of things.
So I think about all this stuff through the lens of expectation. And so when there's an instruction, I think of any instruction as an expectation. So, it's not that you're actually zooming in and zooming out, but you're creating this expectation of a zooming in and zooming out that does actually affect your attention in specific ways. And so I'm wondering how this works, where you're kind of expecting the possibility of the pain to move in this type of way, and that type of expectation might make it easier over time for you to notice that type of dissipation, or that type of spread and then dissipation consciously. Like that's where my mind's going. It's like having an expectation actually might help you be able to notice it more, making it easier for you to notice it without having to have that type of conscious expectation. So like you're building a skill, like a habit of expectation that then becomes deep and habitual rather than some conscious expectation. It's like similar to thinking about paying attention to the breath. Like paying attention to the breath is an expectation that there is a breath to pay attention to. And, when you first start meditating, mindfulness meditating, you might need to be thinking that type of directive really clearly and consciously for you to do it. But over time, that becomes very innate. Like just paying attention to the breath is like a very different type of experience. It's automatic, and perhaps the experience itself is different because you've like stripped away what you've now paid attention to from this like concept of the breath, in a sense. Reminds me of how the Burmese note the intention to raise a foot in walking before their mind can actually notice the flickering mental experience of the intention, but it helps you see it. Yeah. As he says, it goes against a general rule, but subtle exceptions. Right. Yeah, because most of the time you don't need to intend. You don't need to attend to the intention of raising your foot. But if you were to pay attention to for that possibility of an intention, then you can notice it.
So that's one possible strategy for doing it.
Experience
So,
actually,
anyway, I tend
actual
to
intention
sort of
is
try
very
to get
valuable.
the-
That is the idea.
The local splash and the global ripple. And then at some point, I start to freak out. So where does the freak out
And then
come?
obviously we could talk
Well,
about, of course, the reciprocal intending to notice intentions, and then now you're like, intending to notice the intention of noticing the intention, and you get to that nice abstract space.
Freak out is in the subjective system. I start to go, oh my God, no, okay. And I start to get like disconcerting images of being stabbed and burned and, what have you. And then the emotions start to come up in the body. There's a subtle hint of teariness. Locally here, there's a kind of cold fear thing that sort of like pervades the body. Subtle, but subtle is significant. those see and hear and feel in reactions are natural. If you contract them and unblock them, they won't be a problem. If you can't, then they're going to cross-multiply with the physical sensations. And so instead of see in plus hear in plus feel out, you're going to get see in times hear in times feel out. That's why, if you've ever noticed, it's like, I can handle it, I can handle it, I can handle it, no, I can't handle it. Okay? It's not linear, right? It's not like it grows like this, it grows like this. That's because things are starting to cross-multiply. But if you have enough clarity to separate out the strands so that they don't tangle and reinforce each other, then actually it just grows linearly. And yes, it gets more and more and more, but you don't get this sort of like snowballing overwhelm thing. It just grows, and then something happens. And then grows, and then it just flows. And then, yeah, you go through another cycle and it like gets a little more, and then just flows. The whole mind-body process. It's scary because the ordinary ordering principle is completely unavailable. The ordinary ordering principle for the body is get comfortable. The ordinary ordering principle for the mind is get answers. And you can't do either. Those are just not available. The mind can't process. It's, in fact, your eyes are sort of rolling in your head, and you're right on the verge of passing out. But you've got a smile on your face because you're moment by moment tasting purification. And so you're getting an immediate reward. Once again, this may sound radical, but half the people in this room have done this. Right? Remember back if you had kids. So it's just a matter of doing it in a really systematic way. So that's...
Yo, low
really big
cortisol
object,
maxing
the whole
right
mind
now.
itself.
Hell yeah, that's going to be us
But,
next month.
If we appreciate it to the extreme, just as it is, then at some point it becomes flowing space. Gradually, you work your way up to this. It's a homework assignment. You've got the rest of your life to turn in. And you don't have to do it if you don't want to. You can just follow the path of bliss, the jhanas, the absorptions, what have you. That works too.
Okay, I want to dictate this so that we can set it as like a bookmark for next month. But one of the things I want to explore is the difference between these highly specific practices. So for this guy, he's telling you to specifically focus on the pain when it's arising so that when this pain actually arises, you can expect the behavior of this pain and it won't affect you in a way, it won't affect suffering. Now, how does that differ from practices of expecting the unexpected, where perhaps regardless of what you're experiencing, whether it's pain or otherwise, that you are just expecting that you won't know what's to come and that it could be painful or could not be painful? And then, like, could someone who just practices that, but perhaps they haven't experienced pain yet, like, could they then just experience pain and they would be able to get through it because they're just pro at expecting the unexpected? Or is it necessary that you actually have these specific skills and specific practices that gets you ready for all the different types of physiological scenarios that could occur through life and experience? Okay, so this is going to be a question for next month, and I'm trying to create a bunch of these. I'm going to just throw this into Gemini right now, and then I'm going to make sure I rename this. Okay. I remember reading Richard Davidson's team took a saliva sample to measure a monk's cortisol, and it was so low it was off the scientifically possible range. They had to change it. Wow. Main strong equanimity is what is enabling. Maybe you can ask Gemini for what is happening in the brain there. What, for the in the case of cortisol, or in the case of this pain, sustaining pain? Okay. Meditation month. Let's do that. The pain thing. Is this? I'm wondering, should we save this for next month? I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we might want to dive deep into. I refuse to engage in rage bait and excessive first word problem complaints. I've never been so low cortisol. So low cortisol maxed right now. Hell yeah. I'm impervious to rage bait. Okay, here is the objective reality of prolonged sitting and the contemporary consensus on how to manage it. Even in a theoretical perfect ergonomic position, keeping the body static for a full day triggers several negative physiological responses. Spinal compression, sitting places significantly higher mechanical loads on the lumbar discs than standing. Sustained static pressure squeezes fluid out of the invertebral discs, accelerating spinal fatigue and increasing the risk of disc herniation over time. Then we got tissue ischemia. Prolonged pressure on your glutes and thighs restricts capillary blood flow to the tissues. This lack of oxygenated blood causes the numbness, burning, and pain you feel after sitting too long. Vascular risks. Lack of leg muscle contraction allows blood to pool in the lower extremities. In extreme cases of prolonged immobility, this heavily increases the risk of deep vein thrombosis, a potentially fatal blood clot. So, the ergonomic consensus. Contemporary biomechanics, physical therapy, and ergonomics universally agree that safety and comfort in prolonged sitting come from dynamic variation, not a single locked position. If you have a task, whether working, studying, or meditating, that requires you to be seated all day, you must continuously alter your mechanical load. So we got a baseline neutral position. Okay. How about a 30-minute practice? What sitting posture should I take? For this, answer in both cases where A, I have a backrest, and B, I have no backrest. In both cases, assume a soft floor or cushion. It's not a small cushion. Okay, I'm curious about this. I refuse to. Okay, will you give your perspective on this paper related to disagreement? A paper related to disagreement. Dogmatism, moral encroachment, and Wittgensteinian etiquette. What can be done about deep disagreements? We can, when we disagree, and not for some trivial reason, it can seem as if nothing can be done without common ground. Even what appear to be the most basic claims about the world can be the source of disagreement. So this is a topic that's come up on this stream multiple times. If we were to figure out how to find a common ground between disputants, this would be an important first step in adjudicating our deep disagreements. My goal in this paper is to investigate common ground with respect to deep disagreements. To do this, we need to be able to separate legitimate deep disagreements from illegitimate ones in both epistemology, epistemic and moral spheres. What does that mean? What are legitimate or illegitimate disagreements? However, this is easier said than done. Not only are there difficulties such as dogmatism and moral encroachment to overcome, but there are also underlying philosophical problems. The debate in the deep disagreement literature is often framed in terms of Wittgensteinian hinges, which are taken as basic and unanalyzable. This means that when we disagree in this way, we leave ourselves no philosophical recourse. That is, there is nothing further that can be done. The disagreement and our analysis remain at a standstill. An alternative theory is needed. Instead of hinges, I rely on Greenstein, which draws on similar Wittgensteinian texts as the deep disagreement literature. This allows us to both represent the deep disagreements and also to analyze them in a way to potentially adjudicate between different positions. Okay, first of all, the way that we understand these deep disagreements right now is when people have deep disagreements, there's a lot of factors that are contributing to why they feel that certain way. And perhaps it's because that's what they learned when they were younger. So it's like straight up embedded into their neural architecture. Perhaps it is being affected by your information diet or your social sphere. It could have implications on other things you believe, and therefore it's like deep because it's deeply embedded in this type of thing. But the point being is, regardless of what the semantics are of your assertion, we're not going to be able to figure out who is right in a disagreement based on semantics. All it is at the end of the day is compelling people or not compelling people to believe that they're right or wrong. And for the person that, learned this thing from when they were age 2, it's going to be very difficult for them to feel as though they're wrong about something. So I'm a little concerned that this author is talking about adjudicating disagreements in a way that, like, I imagine it's going to be some like way where we're messing with semantics, but I could be wrong. So let's figure it out. You either pull out the biggest sword and coerce them, or refuse to engage in their rage bait and socialize them to finesse their beliefs. In either way, you convince them, right? Actually, I'd imagine that you can't just convince someone via straight fear. You'd have to actually like convince them via conditioning, right? So obviously we've seen that people like prisoners of war are undergo these terrible conditions where they're literally conditioned into believing a certain thing because that will affect their how well they're treated in where they are. And that's like a really dark example, but like in that case there's actual conditioning happening. I don't think it's going to be, I mean, a lot of that is fear, but there needs to be more than just like a single instance of someone scaring you, I think. But socializing and finessing can certainly work. Or you just say, read Wittgenstein and leave. This is an interesting paper. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where this goes. The core thesis. The paper investigates how to find common ground in deep disagreements by distinguishing legitimate fundamental clashes from illegitimate arguments rooted in dogmatism or moral encroachment. The author argues that both epistemic and moral fundamental beliefs can be evaluated and adjudicated by analyzing how they are grounded in everyday compound human experiences. What does that mean? And then also, what is legitimate versus illegitimate? These are the questions to... Yeah, okay. So the nature of deep disagreements. Deep disagreements are not merely intense or stubborn arguments. They occur when disputants clash over underlying framework positions or principles. These disagreements share 4 characteristics. They're genuine disputes. All right, so everyone's being good faith. The parties believe they are providing reasons, right? The disagreements are systematic. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but and they persist without resolution. Okay. So far I think we're chilling. I got to figure out what the disagreements are systematic means, but we could figure that out now. It needs to explain why deep disagreements involve systematic disagreement. Oh no, this is a is it not going to explain what systematic means? What is going on here? We're just going to explain the system that is the outcome here, like a system for adjudicating this without actually saying what systematicity is. What would what would systematic reasons mean? Refer to underlying consistent causes arising from a structured method, process, or system rather than random choice or individual error. These reasons explain why a particular result, bias, or pattern occurs repeatedly. So this is going to be tough to figure out whether or not reasons are systematic. So that's going to be one thing to look out for as we continue. Before adjudicating a deep disagreement, it is necessary to rule out false or illegitimate disputes caused by two primary factors. Dogmatism. Disputants might hold rigidly to their principles without unreflectively considering counter evidence or challenges. This is chuff, or this is like a gray space where, you know, who decides whether they're dogmatic or not? They might believe that they have looked at the counter evidence, right? That's the issue here. There's a lot of people, perhaps people. Let's not go there, but there's a lot of people who believe what they believe because they think they've seen the sufficient counter argument, when perhaps it was either a straw man or it just wasn't actually a comprehensive argument. And yeah. And that's also, once again, and we can't assume that, like, if you were to receive the best counter argument there, that would like affect your position. It might not. If an argument is driven by dogma rather than a genuine framework clash, the disagreement is not actually deep. All right, so this is tough. We got to be careful about this one. Moral encroachment. The inclusion of moral considerations into epistemic reasoning can poison the epistemic well. Disputants might conflate normative claims like murder is wrong with epistemic facts. This is a hand, causing a moral dispute to falsely manifest as an epistemic one. This is also tough, and this is why Wittgenstein is in like a great position, because there's always a pragmatic game being played. Why did I just get double attacked here by cheap viewers? There's always a pragmatic game being played at the same time. So there's an argument always over the semantics of what's being said, and that would be not necessarily like moral, but it's a normative of like, what do we mean by, you know, murder is wrong, or that like this is a hand, and so there's always this other argument at play that's like arguing over how we ought to be able to talk about something, or what something ought to mean, which can obviously get like flow into the moral space, which is also difficult. So we've got two ambiguities that the author is currently using to differentiate legitimate versus illegitimate disputes, which I can't abide by here. All right, the epistemic solution: compounding. To filter out dogma and police our epistemology, the author utilizes the theory of epistemic compounding. Okay. Fundamental truths. Morian facts are legitimate because they refer to experiences we have virtually every single day of our lives. For example, we cannot be mistaken about having hands because we experience them daily. Denying them would unravel our entire life history. If a disputant cannot show how their foundational claims pertain to and compound in everyday life, they may be suffering from dogmatism. Oh no. How do you do this? How do you show that your foundational claim pertains to everyday life? This is so I think what's required here is some assumption that there is like a grounded set of like true facts about the world, which obviously we do follow a lot of those, but a lot of these become quite ambiguous. So yeah, it's going to be a dispute over which facts are certainly grounded in your everyday life, and that's going to be tough. The moral solution, moral etiquette. Because epistemic compounding does not resolve moral disagreements, the author extends the compounding concept to ethics. A functional moral theory must reject rare, contrived thought experiments like the trolley problem, or extreme scenarios like murder because they are not daily occurrences. Instead, moral experiences rooted in moral etiquette, defined as daily rituals and practices that provide feedback on the quality of our interactions and lives. These compounded daily habits, such as greeting others or listening to one's physical needs, build an active background attitude or worldview. This baseline attitude serves as the necessary transcendental condition from which an individual makes normative moral judgments. Okay, achieving resolution. When evaluating a profound moral disagreement, disputants can look past the surface clash to examine the everyday coping mechanisms and rituals that form the opponent's background attitude. For instance, someone with chronic pain and someone dealing with severe grief have both compounded daily experiences of suffering. So, okay, I feel like this resolution is just we should empathize with others, figure out how they got their position. I don't know why we have to go into this whole daily thing. This is once you go into this idea of the rule about daily life, you're making like you're following a heuristic that chances are daily conditioning is going to affect where they end up. So, if their daily life has their information diet leading them in some way, or their daily life involves a environment where they're speaking with these types of people and this is what they're seeing, right? I would rather not have this heuristic though, and just say like, let's just try to empathize with how they arrived at this position and what type of experience might make them change their mind on this one. So, by recognizing the daily grounded reality of other people's experience, disputants realize their opponent is not deriving their position from unreflective dogma. I mean, they still might be. This recognition establishes a moral common ground, making the disagreement. So I don't know if this really helps us out too much. But I'm glad that it ended up in a let's empathize with others, because that's kind of where we have to go. I don't know why we need to systematize this in this type of way. But interesting nonetheless. Okay. Could we get a summary here? All right, what's going on here? Energy Dompter. We got heart, and then September. Nice. A heart snake. Okay, this video features an interview with Swami Sarva Priyananda, a Hindu monk from the Ramakrishna order and the resident Swami at the Vedanta Society of New York. He discusses Hinduism and Advaita Vedanta, focusing on the philosophical aspects of consciousness and reality. Here are the discussion points. He explains that Hinduism is a religion and Advaita Vedanta is one of its many philosophical schools. He introduces the Vedas as the fundamental texts of Hinduism and defines Vedanta as the end of the Vedas. He elaborates on the Upanishads, which are the philosophical and knowledge-based portions of the Vedas, distinguishing them from the ritualistic sections. He clarifies that Upanishads are identifiable within the Vedas and vary in length. The term Upanishad literally means to sit down next to a teacher, signifying the transmission of secret, clear, and ignorance-destroying knowledge. Okay. Core teachings of the Upanishads. Swami summarizes the essence as Brahman is the reality, the world is an appearance, and you are Brahman. He defines Brahman as the vast, limitless, ultimate reality. Okay. So we're just getting a view of consciousness, and the world as something meaningful, as having meaning, appears within consciousness. He explains Brahman as pure existence, not existing things, right? Because these thoughts are fleeting. So what we believe to be there is fleeting. It's changing, it's dynamic, it comes and it goes. Using the analogy of a dream where everything seen is a projection of the dreamer's mind, right? It's all subconscious. It's subjective. It's all perspectival, if that's the right word. It's all interpretation in some sense. Consciousness is described as the light of all lights, the irreducible minimum of being awareness, and something that is affirmed even in its denial. Depends what affirmed means here. Advaita Vedanta is a non-dualistic philosophy proposing that there is only one type of stuff in the universe, consciousness, in contrast to dualistic views. We follow this pretty closely. The self or ego is identified as a psychological function of the mind that integrates experience into an individual unit and reflects consciousness. Okay. And then a key teaching is the identity of Brahman and Atman, the individual self, summarized by the phrase, "You are that." Which is it's kind of similar to being there for Heidegger. It's like a fundamental characteristic of consciousness is being there. That's kind of similar to "you are that." So Swami clarifies that in Hinduism, Brahman can be understood as God, but it is a broader, more philosophical concept than the personal God often conceived in Western religions. Right. So this is the way that if I were to make sense of any text that talks about God, I would think about it through this lens. Praise Ishvara. Oh, was Ishvara mentioned here? Or what is Ishvara? Ishvara can mean Lord, ruler, king, husband, queen, soul, or the supreme self. Oh, was that the self? Was that similar to the self here? Ishvara is the personal form of God. Oh, nice. In Vedanta, right? Which is what I believe that in like at least I know or I shouldn't say I know, at least in the Christian texts, I imagine that is really what people are trying to make sense of, which makes sense, when you talk about God as the judge, or God as the creator. God said, "Let there be light." Like he's the thing that is allowing you to notice anything, right? It's just consciousness itself as the thing. All right. Hell yeah. Okay, so we need to follow up on this one. For a 30-minute practice, the primary biochemical goal is to establish a posture that maintains the natural curvature of the spine with minimal muscular effort. At this duration, you are not battling severe tissue ischemia, but rather muscular fatigue. If your skeleton is improperly aligned, your muscles will have to work continuously to keep you upright, leading to back pain and distraction. The universal rule for floor sitting, regardless of backrest availability, is that your hips must be elevated higher than your knees. This naturally tilts the pelvis forward and stacks the spine correctly. Ooh. Good morning, Birdbanes. Welcome to the weekend. Do you believe in Mauryan facts? Out of curiosity, what are Mauryan facts? is an obvious common sense truth, such as I have hands or the earth has existed for a long time. Depends on what you mean by believe in these things, right? Like we've talked thoroughly about how I believe that we arrive at these self-evident truths through a cultural process. Like we learn these things. So these truths, I believe, are learned pretty much, and they are fundamental in the sense that they are like deeply rooted in our neural architecture, such that it would be very difficult for us to arrive at a different response when we hear, you know, the phrase we have hands or something like that. I have hands. Like I can only think that I have hands is a true statement. Like that's how I feel. Now, it would take I don't know what it would take, but it would be very difficult for me to get a different interpretation of I have hands that makes me feel like that's not true. But it's possible. So yeah, it's, you know, I don't believe in any like, you know, this is the same deal. We've said this over and over again. Any objective absolute facts are not things that you know, we can believe outside of the context of culture and learning and, you know, what you experience in the moment. What are we on today? We are doing whatever. We're jumping around, doing a bunch of things. Oh boy, self-evident truths about. And we have to learn how to sit well for long meditations. But in the meantime, Heidegger being Heidegger. Being is one thing and being's kind of a different thing, right? Being is kind of like meaning and consciousness. That's what he means by being. You could think of it as consciousness itself, but really he's trying to, in Being in Time, he's trying to connect consciousness itself to our notion, our intuitive understanding of meaning, of things being things. And now when we think about things being things concretely, we're talking about beings here. We're talking about, you know, like when I think about this is my hand, I'm at the level of like being. That's what this hand is like. That's what this object is. It's a hand. This is a pen. These are all beings in lowercase b. But being, like the capital B, being of this pen would be like, how is this pen manifesting to me in consciousness? That's kind of what that's kind of, you know, that's what he's getting at with this one. So when you see big B being, you're thinking of all the ways that this is manifesting in consciousness, and lowercase b beings is like semantics. Semantics, consciousness. That's your way of differentiating these. Okay, who are all these people? Are these just more Nazis? Philosophy school, in school would be taught like this, the quality of memes on the internet would drastically rise. All right. Sofa or beanie bag, no good for meditation? Well, I think so far all it said, well, so I asked for if I have a backrest and if I don't have a backrest. So the universal rule, though, is that your hips must be elevated higher than your knees. This naturally tilts the pelvis forward and stacks the spine correctly. Here is structurally optimal way to approach both scenarios using a soft floor and a cushion. So if you've got a backrest, sitting with a backrest, when using a backrest, the most common error is the slump, sliding the pelvis forward, rounding the lower back, and collapsing the chest. This forces the posterior spinal ligaments to bear your weight. The goal here is to use the backrest to support a neutral spine, not to recline. So the base, place your cushion close to the backrest, sit on the front third of the cushion, cross your legs. What does sit on the front third of the cushion? Oh, this is, okay, so this is, You're sitting at the back of the cushion, but the front, that's what the front third of the cushion, I think, means. And you're crossing your legs. But how are we crossing our legs? The Burmese style. Burmese style crossing legs. Okay, I have to start doing this. How do you do this? How to Burmese style. Okay, so hips above knees. With one heel tucked near the pelvis and the other leg resting flat on the floor in front of it. Flat on the floor, one tucked. Okay. It's structurally stable and accessible for most hip mobilities. So then we've got the pelvic anchor. Slide your hips all the way back so that your sacrum, the flat bone on the base of your spine, makes firm contact with the intersection of the floor / cushion and the backrest. So you want contact to be at like a low point in your back. And then if the backrest is completely flat and straight like a wall, wedge a small rolled up towel or a secondary thinner cushion between your lower back and the backrest. This actively support. Okay, so you want to be somewhat forward on this. You don't want to be slouching. You want to be forward. At least for, you want that your what is this? Your lower back. So this is lower than your lower back, right? Base of the spine, yeah. And then upper body alignment. Allow your shoulder blades to lightly touch the back. Okay, so wow. Keep your head balanced directly. So you really just want some space in the middle here. And then you want your back. You basically just want to be going straight up then. Keep your head balanced directly over your torso. Do not let the backrest push your chin forward into a forward head. So you don't want to go actually forward here. I was wrong about that. You want to be just straight up. Straight up. What does Gemini know about meditation postures? Gemini knows everything about everything. Because humans know a lot about meditation postures, and they wrote it down on the internet, and then Gemini ganked that. And then that's what we're reading. Rather than reading that, why not look for a picture that's worth 1,000 words? Because the picture doesn't have all this extra information that is really useful. I couldn't figure all this stuff out just by looking at these things. What are they sourcing? That's a good question. What are they sourcing? Are we sourcing anything? Any sources here? No sources. We're not sourcing anything for now. I mean, in this case, this is information that I'd imagine is quite clear within within the training data. This isn't too crazy. I haven't found AI to be good on meditation, to be honest. Let me say a story about Larry Rosenberg. He goes into in his book. He went to a Zen retreat being able to do a full lotus. A monk came up to him and said, "The lotus is your problem. Too much focus on posture." Ah. Smells like bull. Well, that's fair enough. Unfortunately, we didn't get a source, but I don't know. My trust in a lot of this AI stuff is actually it's certainly over a 90% just based on all the stuff that I've seen that I know is right, or that I've read, and then I've read in other books, and I've been like, oh my gosh, I learned this through Gemini. That's crazy. So I don't know. I feel like between all this stuff. Now, granted, when I'm working, like when I'm doing software, my guard is much more up. And when we're looking at very specific, in the weeds concepts, my guard is up, which happens all the time with like neuroscience and whatnot. So there are times when my guard is up. This is not a time where my guard is up. When we're talking about like how to sit properly, or like how to gain muscle in working out, like this information's everywhere. Now, perhaps the one issue with some of this is that perhaps the information is slightly older than like cutting edge. And in that case, perhaps I could ask like, is this cutting edge? Is this definitely right? Now, for this case, I don't think there's going to be more cutting edge stuff because it's just how you sit. I'm sure we figured that stuff out 20 years ago. But weight training might be different. I'm not sure. Just ask its source like any of your other questions. We could do that. I don't trust this. Can you prove it to me through sources? I doubt everything it says by default. I have questions related to meta ethics. Okay, let the meta ethics rip. Yeah, it's just doubting everything it says by default. I feel like is just not commensurate with how well it does in all these benchmarks. Like these benchmarks show that it's not perfect, but these benchmarks show that you should definitely be more than 50% certain that what it's telling you is true about certainly about very simple facts. So if you were to ask how far away is the moon from the sun, I would bet my life that would be correct. Maybe not my life, just in case. But I would bet all the money I own. That would be better. How much money would I bet on that fact? Oh man, I would bet like 80% of my money, perhaps, if I really wanted to do this. If it's like to double it, yeah, I think 80% of my money. Okay. On Moore's open question argument against meta-ethical naturalism. Okay. Sitting without a backrest, without external support, your body must form a stable self-supporting structure. The most biomechanically efficient shape for this is a tripod. Sit on the front third. Okay, your hips must be elevated high enough that both knees rest firmly on the soft floor, bearing some of your weight. The tripod, your two knees and your buttocks form the 3 points of the tripod. If your knees are floating in the air, your base is unstable. Your hip flexors will grip and your lower back will quickly fatigue. If you cannot get your knees to the floor, you need a higher cushion. Okay, tripod sitting. We've got babies. Is this not an actual thing? In terms of like tripod base? Okay, is this really just the same deal? Something like this? And then this might be what it was saying, like you might need to raise it up if you can't get your knees on the ground. Spinal stacking. Once the pelvis is tilted forward and the tripod is secure, stack your skeleton. Imagine a plumb line dropping from the ceiling. Your ears should align over your shoulders. Why not the whole like imagine you're being held up by a string thing? Isn't that good for your posture? Once stacked, consciously relax your muscles in your abdomen and back. The skeletal alignment should be doing the work, not muscular tension. Huh. Universal arm and hand placement. In both scenarios, the placement of your arms dictates the posture of your upper spine. Do not let your hands hang off your knees. The weight of your arms will slowly pull your shoulders forward, rounding your upper back. So what do we have? We have on your knees or on your, I don't know, on your knees or like that. And then here we've got something similar. That. This is how we're going to do meditations from now on. Not much on the knees here. But what are we betting on? We're betting on whether or not Gemini can give us an accurate result for how far away the moon is from the sun. And I'm pretty confident it would give an accurate result on a fact like that. Now, if it starts doing math, though, then we're actually we're in a bad position, because I don't know how effective it is at doing math. I'm not betting on that. All right, we gotta figure that one out. All right, let's do it after the sources here. Here is the biomechanical and ergonomic evidence supporting these structural guidelines. The consensus on static sitting versus move. So another thing that's also really helpful for me is when it can give like a lot of side information that like connects, and now it's like it would be much easier to figure out if it was wrong in something because the connections are wrong. But it could be wrong about all this. It could, a study from University of Waterloo on the spine might not exist. Like, can I see these studies? Like, where can you find the links to these studies? Okay, Gemini, here we go. How far away is the moon from the sun? How do I actually look up how far away is the moon from the sun without actually what? Without actually oh, okay, we got a paper here. The moon on average is about 150 million kilometers away from the sun. $150 million kilometers, 150 million kilometers, 150 million kilometers. All right, I would have doubled 80% of my money. And we're getting sources here, but we're not. Are we getting any sources here? Is this going to exist? Oh, look at this. Spine biomechanics of prolonged sitting, exploring the effect chair features. We got 2015, walking breaks and spine manipulation on the posture and perceived pain in men and women. Okay. So, results. The extensive lumbar spine flexion and sitting compared to upright standing and maximum flexion. Sitting in an office chair, regardless of design, features to reduce spine flexion. Result in postures of approximately 70% of maximum range of lower back flexion. No significant differences in lower back posture were found between the chair, blah, 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 blah. Oh, man, these improved posture were maintained actively by the muscles despite the improvement in the posture. Okay, I actually don't want to read all this. There's a lot to read. The finding documented. I don't know. Do we want to follow this up? Defines the hazard of prolonged sitting as being sedentary for 2 hours or longer, characterized by. Okay, so this was from the beginning of our conversation. Is that a seated posture must be broken every 20 to 30 minutes to restore circulation, and that individuals must practice dynamic sitting. Okay, so this is actually kind of saying that if we want to make sure that we're not screwing something up in terms of our like back, then or muscles or anything in our legs, then perhaps 30 minutes is a good max. Now, granted, you don't get the benefits of longer meditation, but I don't know if I'm going to be I'm not going to be more crazy about meditation than I am about my body here. Now, perhaps I lose that once I give up the possession of my body. Okay, I gotta read through all this. You heard that, folks. Time to feed the internet with info that says the distance between the Earth and the Sun to be 2 blocks away. Yep. To me, it just seems the well is poisoned, seems chill, but then you ask in your area of expertise and it's totally wrong or subtle wrong. Right. So you have to be more careful. So just because it's not good at like really nuanced in the weeds things doesn't mean that it's not good at very common information. It's not like one is actually implying that it's not going to be good at the other. In fact, that's what you would expect given how these things actually learn. If there's less information that it's learning from for your expertise, then it shouldn't be able to give you that response as accurately. But information such as like how far away the the moon is from the sun, or what I should eat that would be healthy, or how to make a dish, like all of these like this information is so common on the internet that it should be able to get this right with like almost perfect accuracy. Or just word salading, right? The only acceptable meditation sitting posture sounds awfully like you can't drive on the road unless you buy a Tesla. I mean, I'm sure driving's not great for your back. Also, in my opinion, it's personalized and not very important. Just don't damage the body. Right, but what if you know that it damages the body? Like I don't so obviously that guy talked about damaging the body, and he seemed to dismiss the idea that you could damage the body by sitting still, and I would probably bet against that just based on what we read. You know, I trust Gemini more than I trust individuals now, unless they are experts in a field, or unless I trust them in a certain specific domain. Now, that isn't to say that individuals are perfect, or they're also that's not to say that they're so not perfect that I don't listen to them. But just like how I now like kind of consider that someone might not be right about something, I consider that Gemini is not right about something, but I consider that Gemini is probably going to be more right than the person. Like for a computer science 101 class, I would bet on Gemini over the professor. 100%. After this, can you answer my question related to meta ethics? Absolutely. What was the question here? Let's get rid of this. I could find it. It was more. Can you briefly explain flawed question. It depends on the orbital ellipse. Orbital ellipse. The distance varies depending on the time in the year. Oh, that's actually a good question, or like a good thing to note. Why are all these things saying on average? Aha, so it gave us an average. Now, I just deleted it, but I didn't even look farther into the Gemini response, but it might have actually given us more information on that. But those are follow-up questions we could have asked, and it probably would have given it to us. Our orbit isn't circular, right? We lost one to Skynet, boys and girls. Oh, no. Lost to Skynet. I'm not convinced anyone actually reads Shakespeare. Okay. I've just been thinking. It doesn't have universal aptitude, though. Oh, what is universal aptitude? Oh, right. It's not, like, I think that's what I was saying, right? It's aptitude on all different kinds of information is not the same. So I'm trying to, like, point out that there's information that I think is pervasive on the, like, in its training data, and it would get correct almost 100% of the time. Meditation subjects is pretty bad at, to be honest. Yeah, and perhaps that one, it's... I imagine meditation, it's difficult to do also because different meditation branches conceptualize things in different and often competing or contradicting ways. So that could be difficult for it. Ask it again. Do you think you get charged per question to Gemini? I do not get charged per question for Gemini, which is kind of the cool thing about Gemini, as opposed, or like that's the cool thing about paying for any of these services, their chat feature, rather than paying per use via their API. Ask it again. The moon question. How about this? How far is the moon from the sun today? But you can feed direct text into it and it will misquote and mischaracterize. Oh, from what you've just fed in? Yeah, I guess it depends how much of a context window you have and how complex the thing that you're asking is. But chances are, if you had like a simple spreadsheet, it'd be able to tell you what was in a certain row. You know, like I think these tools have gotten quite good at very simple operations. All right, Moore introduced the open question argument to refute metaethical naturalism, the view that moral properties can be reduced to or defined by natural, empirically observable properties. Okay, so we at least agree upon our conclusion. Now let's see if we agree upon the way to get there, the argument to get there. Moore's argument rests on the linguistic and logical distinctions between open and closed questions. Okay, closed questions are the answers deduced purely by understanding the definitions of the terms. Asking, I know he. So let's just make this a little more pragmatic here, because we are always in a linguistic pragmatic space. If we're talking and we're trying to agree upon these things, it matters whether or not our understandings are pragmatically similar in terms of how we understand the definitions of the terms. So asking, I know he is a bachelor, but is he an unmarried man, is a closed question. Asking it indicates a failure to understand the word bachelor. Right, so we're talking about, we both understand that the concept of bachelor precludes the possibility that the man is also unmarried, or that he's also married. My apologies. Open questions. The answer is not analytically obvious from the terms alone. Asking, I know he is a bachelor, but is he happy, is an open question. Okay, so this is really just whether or not it's we're dealing with concepts that have clear implications or not clear implications. The logical structure, or it's clear that the implications aren't there. Like in this case, I don't think anyone... Actually, no. You know what? No, unclear implications, because some people might have this very notion that a bachelor is inherently happy or unhappy. The logical structure. Moore applies this framework to test any attempt to define good as a natural property, which we will denote as the variable n. Assume that good analytically means that. Then if good and n are perfectly synonymous, then asking, I know this action maximizes pleasure, is it good, should be the closed question. Thinking, yeah, that means, if n means that, it should be functionally identical to asking, I know this action maximizes pleasure, does it maximize pleasure? For any natural property n, a philosopher proposes the question, I know x possesses n, but is x actually good, remains logically open question. A competent speaker can fully understand the concept of pleasure and still meaningfully debate whether it is intrinsically good. Because the question always remains open, good cannot be synonymous with n. Okay. Moore concluded that equating moral properties with natural properties commits what he called the naturalistic fallacy. Instead, he argued that goodness is a simple, unanalyzable, non-natural property. He compared it to the concept of yellow. You cannot break... Okay, so this is where we're going to go. We're going to say goodbye to Moore. All right, contemporary consensus. While it practically birthed modern analytic meta-ethics, contemporary consensus generally agrees that the argument is logically flawed and does not successfully defeat naturalism. All right. Well, yeah, like in any case, if I'm gonna see this type of thing, then I'm gonna just probably say, all right, I trust whoever's making this contemporary consensus. So, yeah. Right, the primary pushback relies on the philosophy of language, specifically the distinction between sense and reference. Oh no, we've gone too deep in the sense-reference dualism. So then we're going to get out of this problem, we have to follow Hegel and Brandom and our understanding of neuroscience and our understanding of what we're doing by talking about these, blah, blah, blah. Okay. How far is the moon from the sun today? Today, the moon is approximately 91.7 million miles from the sun. Because the Earth-Moon system orbits, so this is February 20th, 2026. The Earth is about 147 million kilometers from the sun. We are a few weeks past perihelion, our closest annual approach to the sun, which occurred in early January. So the Earth is slowly moving farther away. The moon is currently averaging 374,000 kilometers from Earth as it moves toward its perigee, its closest approach to Earth, on February 24th. As of today, the moon is in a waxing crescent phase. Does anyone, who's the astrologist that can verify this information? Because it recently passed the new moon phase on February 17th. The moon is currently positioned along the interior of Earth's orbit, meaning it sits slightly closer to the sun than the Earth does. Wow. To calculate it, we got this crazy thing. We got that. Uh-oh, it's doing math, so now I don't know. I don't know how well this... Someone's going to have to do this. If anyone wants, 80% of my money, this is what you have to do. That's the math you got to do. All right, let's delete that once again. And I might save this. How to sit. How to sit for meditation. Might want to use that. Okay, what do we have here? We got a bunch of random windows. Okay, what do you think of Huberman? I think I've mixed feelings on Huberman. I watched at least like his first 20 podcasts, and I thought they were amazing. Like I learned a lot from those, and I think he talks about that type of thing often. I'm not thrilled by the crowd that he hangs out with, and I've heard that he's been off on certain things. I don't think it's cool that he had 5 relationships without telling any of them that he was in them. I think that might show that he's doesn't have the type of moral character that I would have hoped. I've heard that he's actually been a contentious person to some people. Some people have given accounts of being uncomfortable around Huberman. But I'm sure he's still talking about the same stuff that he's always been talking about, and he's probably still trying very hard to be on the cutting edge of a lot of this science. So depending on what he's talking about, I would believe him more than if he was talking about certain other things. I might not trust him on how to stay in a relationship. That being said, he actually might be able to know things about being in a relationship that he doesn't actually do. And I'm not a huge fan of not following something someone says because they're a hip. I don't really care about hypocrisy a lot of the time. I think for politicians, I care more about it. But if there was someone, let's just say if there was an obese person that knew a lot about health and nutrition, I wouldn't care. They're not an expert in addiction, perhaps. So they're an expert in nutrition and health. And so if they say something about that, I would take it. I would assume it's, I assume some reliability there. Okay, I'm kind of room temperature on him, but he did an episode with Sam where he got Sam to speak very neuroscience-y. It was informative. Yeah, I assume Huberman knows a lot about a lot of stuff. I mean, we might even want to go through the Huberman podcast to find clear tools for improving your life, whether that is for pursuing your goals or if that's for feeling happier and a more meaningful life. Sounds like a job for value theory. So to clarify, you believe that he was correct in being skeptical of meta-ethical naturalism, however you don't agree with his methodology? Yeah, I think that would be good. And when I say, correct in being, it's more that I just, I agree with the skepticism. It's not that I like think it's correct in some like fundamental sense, but I think it's apt given what we know about science and whatnot. Astrologist, yep. Should we bother to correct him if he's this fanboy over Gemini's theorem on meditative sitting posture? I didn't know that. I remember him saying the most idiotic stuff about meditation. Right, yeah, I don't know if Huberman practices meditation, so that might be not a strong suit. Now, he might know a lot about focus, just in general. Like, he does know a lot about focus. He knows a lot about the neuromodulators we've been talking about. Everything that we've talked about in the, not this stuff. What am I looking for? Part 2, biological conditions. So he knows a lot about dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. He knows what can maximize that stuff. He knows how effective sleep is. He knows all this stuff. He'll tell you how it's really effective to get sunlight early in the morning for your emotional well-being for the rest of the day, or your ability to, I don't know, whatever it is. You have to realize that Huberman's main gig is entertainment, right? That's the concern. Like, the concern is over time, Huberman's been audience captured to some extent. So the idea that he might be now in bed with sponsors, or that he might be in bed with his audience, like, these are things that we now have to consider. And also, these are things that we should consider for the sake of that I don't follow a similar path. No matter how much I think I'll be fine, I cannot be certain. Go down the Huber hole. We're going down the Huber hole. Can Gemini teach us how to drive a car? I mean, really drive a car. Are you asking, like, can Gemini teach us things that require physical practice in order to learn? Or are you saying, like, if there was a... Like, I would trust Gemini. Actually, you know what? I would trust, here we go. I'm sitting down in front of the wheel of a car for the very first time, and I want to learn how to drive it. Can you help me out?
Absolutely, Stan. Let's break it down step by step. First, make sure you're familiar with the pedals, the accelerator on the right, and the brake on the left in an automatic. Adjust your seat and mirrors so you have full visibility. Start the car, keeping your foot on the brake. Shift into drive if it's automatic, or prepare to engage first gear if manual. Gently ease off the brake, lightly press the accelerator, and focus on smooth movement.
All right, you're moving way too fast. Can we first look at this, adjust the seat and mirrors? Like, how do I do that? And then how do I even start the car?
No rush at all, let's slow it down. For your seat, there's usually a lever or electronic controls on the side. You want to be close enough to press the pedals fully, but not cramped. For mirrors, adjust side mirrors so you see a sliver of your car and a wide view of the road. The rear view mirror should show you straight back through your rear window. Now, starting the car, press the brake, turn the key, or press the start button, and you'll hear the engine come to life.
Okay, the car is now running. So what did you mention about how to actually drive this thing? Like, what should I be doing right now?
All right, with the car running, keep your foot on the brake. If it's automatic, shift into drive. If manual, press the clutch and shift to first gear. Ease your foot off the brake or clutch, slowly and gently press the accelerator. Keep your eyes on where you're going and start rolling forward. Keep speed low and practice smooth braking. You'll want an open space and just focus on starting, stopping, and steering gently for now.
So like if I had a decision, if I had the choice between like I don't know, a driver instructor or this type of AI, it would be a decision I'd have to make. I would want to know the personality of the person I'm talking with, because like they might be like saying jokes or something, or they might have like weird quirks or idiosyncrasies that might make it more difficult when I would want to just ask these questions and get a straight up answer. So I might prefer the AI in my ear, you know? I think that might be the way to go. Especially since you can get when you get this on your phone, you can actually have it have a camera. So I would probably rather the AI who could see what I'm looking at. Now, maybe not for driving because that's hard to do, but I would rather that than have someone I'm hearing. But then chances are I would rather have the driver next to me than any AI system. Like I would want a driving teacher sitting next to me than any AI. But now if there was AI that was a robot that was sitting next to me and could like point to things, then now we're in a position where it's like maybe I would want that. So maybe what I just said there was weird. Okay. Well, yeah, so it depends what we mean by really drive a car, because it's really going to take muscle memory and learning to actually learn how to drive a car. There was other stuff, but I remember him saying he meditates by rotating through all his roles in life. I thought, who said that to do that? That's like anti-Buddhism. Right, yeah. I mean, he might just not be practicing Buddhism. Maybe he's just, it's more like prayer in that sense. Like it's a different type of meditation. Broaditation, nice. Brit will teach you to drive on the wrong side. True. Oh, I should have asked that. What side of the road should I go to? We asked it if we could land an airplane once. It was pretty good, right? Now ask it how to sit. I'm standing here and I just all of a sudden realize that I forget how to sit. Can you teach me how to sit?
All right, Stan, let's break it down like we're learning it for the first time. Start by positioning yourself in front of a sturdy chair. Line yourself up so the back of your knees are close to the edge. Now bend at the hips and knees, letting your behind move back as if you're reaching for the seat. Keep your torso upright, and once you feel the seat, gently lower yourself down. There you go, now you're sitting.
What do you mean by my behind?
Oh, just your backside, your butt. I was being a bit playful. Basically, you let your hips shift backwards so that you're guiding yourself down to the chair. No mystery, just gravity and good posture.
Okay, I actually don't have a backrest here. What am I supposed to do?
No worries. If there's no backrest, you're basically aiming for a balanced sit. Keep your core slightly engaged as you lower yourself so you're stable. Once seated, your spine should stay fairly upright on its own. Imagine there's a string gently pulling you up from the top of your head. You'll be fine. Just stay balanced.
Okay, I want to make sure that I'm right about this because I'm about to sit down for 30 whole minutes without moving a single muscle. How should I do this so that I don't get hurt or that I reduce any damage that could happen?
If you're going to sit still for that long, let's do it smartly. First, ensure your feet are flat on the ground, about hip width apart. Keep a slight natural curve in your lower back. Don't slouch, but also don't overarch.
This is still expecting
shoulders relaxed,
like
arms
I'm
resting
sitting on
naturally.
a stool or something.
Engage
like
your
that.
core just a little. Every now and then, even if you're not standing, subtly shift your weight or wiggle your toes. It's these tiny shifts that keep blood flow and reduce stiffness.
To be clear, I'm not sitting on a stool or anything. I'm sitting on like a cushion on the ground. So I can't just, if I'm going to have my feet flat on the ground, then my knees are going to be sticking up straight. My back's going to want to go backwards.
Got it. You're on the ground. In that case, think of a relaxed but supported posture. You'll want to sit cross-legged or with your legs slightly out. Place the cushion so your hips are a bit elevated, which helps your back stay upright. Let your spine have a neutral, natural curve. If you need, put something behind you, like a wall, just to gently lean back. The key is not locking yourself rigid. Find a comfortable, sustainable position.
This is where those like yoga cushions are really helpful. What are those? Bolster. Yoga bolster. This is what we want. Yeah, we want a yoga bolster here. Get one of these. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Yeah, this is what we want. We want to just sit on the bolster so that our knees can... Oh, actually, her knees are still higher. But we got to get our knees lower than our hips. But yeah, that's the gist. Bro, you don't understand the vision, bro. If you meditate like that, it means... That means, like, bro, it means... You, like, go through all the beliefs and roles, bro. It's like meditation for your roles, bro. You need to do it, bro. Try it out, bro. How else are you going to Zen Mog? How else are you going to... shit. What are other good phrases here? I mean, I guess what you said earlier was great. The something maxing. Low cortisol maxing. We're low cortisol maxing. We're Zen mogging. What else? 3,000 years ago, monks only had dirt and grass. How pampered the humans have become. We are quite pampered. But I'm not like of the type where it's like we should just go back to nature. We should just go back because usually there is some like naturalistic argument of like it must have been better because that's what people used to do. It's like we know what's best for whatever criteria you're looking for, or we don't. But you know, if the goal is to sit comfortably, or maybe it's not to sit comfortably, but to sit for long periods of time without damaging your body, then we have like an answer. The Zenist doesn't exist, so how can he Zen Mog anything? True. Well, you know what? Maybe I should say that that would be more apt for someone in the bro meditation space to say. They wouldn't like that's I feel like that's normal with bro culture. It's like they'll say something and it shows that they don't even understand the underlying thing they're talking about. So for someone to talk about Zen mogging, they've already missed the point. So I thought the goal was to achieve a meditative sitting posture. Right, the original goal was like we're doing this for a long period of time. How do we do it such that we aren't hurting ourselves? Because the original idea was we're doing this for a day. We're actually going to sit in this position and not move for an entire day. What do we do? Now, I don't know. Do they get sleep deprived? Like, how does that work? There's some Tibet logic where they say the perceiver of the moon doesn't exist, so therefore the moon doesn't exist. I was like, what am I reading? He metamogs everyone by not even existing. Wow. It's so samsara coded. Can you interpret this? It's basically saying mogging is very samsara. In other words, the speaker is framing mogging as something that fits the vibe theme of samsara. Mogging is slammed for outclassing or humiliating someone by looking better, being more impressive, higher status. Samsara, it's a concept in Buddhism or Hinduism, meaning the cycle of rebirth and suffering driven by craving, ego, attachment, and ignorance. Coded, internet slang, meaning it has the energy of or is strongly associated with. So the full meaning of this is something like this obsession with outdoing and dominating people is totally in line with samsara. It's ego, in other words, it's ego-driven, comparative, craving, attachment-based, and therefore part of the suffering cycle mindset. Depending on the tone, it can be critical, spiritual dunk, so you're mogging on the person who's talking about mogging, which would be paradoxical in this whole thing. Or we could just, have it ironic, meme-y. So rather than mogging his ego poison its samsara in action, we could say this is exactly the kind of worldly trap spiritual people warn about. That's where we want to be in, because this would be paradoxical. We'd be doing the same thing ourselves. We'd be, mogging the mogger. If you tell me where you saw it, I can pin down the tone more precisely. Okay. Existing in a higher plane, I see. Sit on a flat cushion between you and the ground. Cross-legged postures, whatever feels comfortable. You'll refine it as you gain more experience. I did like, though, the advice to have your knees lower than your hip, because that affects your, like, I don't know, lower pelvic tilt. Like in real intuitive words, it will affect how much back pain you have. Like that's helpful for me. Never fight mogging with mogging. I had thought it was straight asking a non-physical regurgitator for tip when it doesn't have legs or a body or knows what's comfortable. Right, but you can't assume that it's like a person, right? Don't assume that AI is a person. AI is just text coming out. That's it. It's not a person. It's not someone that can think. It's not someone that can do. So, to think that they are unprivileged in the sense that they can't walk around, so they don't know what walking's like, would not hold up. It's like this thing will just spit out what humans have said. This is a human emulator. That's what this is. And so when I'm asking what these things are, I'm really getting the answer of, like, if all humans came together. This is giving me Pluribus. This is a Pluribus machine. That's what this AI is. I don't know if you've seen Pluribus, but that's what the AI is. And it's kind of frustrating that our main character has not used it more effectively. But yeah, it would also be inappropriate to say that, like, it knows what is comfortable in, like, a physical sense. Like, it doesn't know what's comfortable in the same way that I know what's comfortable, or that I know what a pepperoni tastes like. Like, that wouldn't be appropriate. Now, actually, that's actually a good question here. What does pepperoni taste like?
Pepperoni has a bold, savory taste with a bit of a spicy kick. It's a cured meat, so it's salty, and you'll get a punch of garlic and paprika. It's got a slightly smoky, tangy flavor from the curing process. When cooked on something like pizza, it crisps up, and the fat renders, adding a rich, umami-packed bite.
All right, that's all right. I mean, it's not going to obviously have the conscious experience, but yeah, all these things that could be explained, it can explain it. Okay, we've lost our ability to delete. Oh, okay. She got her rocks off from what? Me trolling the professor when asked to contribute to the discussion. Uh-oh. Jordan Peterson meme?
The question, did that happen, begs the question, what do you mean by happen? The reality of the concept...
Okay, so I already know, I think, this is my guess, that he's talking about whether or not some religious thing happened. That's my guess of what's going on here. And so he's going to make this, like, semantic issue about what it would mean for something, for the Bible to have said that something has happened. And... I need to get back to my roots, because, I've said this before, and I still hold this to this day. And I still say, like, it depends what you mean by this. Whenever you say it depends by what you mean by this, it's good etiquette to then iterate through different meanings that we could arrive at, that you think that other people would assume, or what you think other people could think that means. So if I think... So in the case of the Bible, do I think that these events actually happened as factual events, a singular time, with the same details that are said in the Bible? No. Do I think that different events might have happened over a long span of time, such that there's the stories of each of these have slowly crystallized into the stories that we see in the Bible? Perhaps. And I would say perhaps even likely. But the trajectory of those ideas are quite messy. Like, we just don't know how the trajectory of those ideas. So this is kind of a theoretical, speculative interpretation of how the ideas got to a point where the event has happened. So then we could also say, like, when we say happen, there's an implication of it represents something about the past. And, you know, I think that Jordan Peterson is trying to retain this aspect of these stories actually telling us something about the events that happened in the past. So that's where I'm going to go with that. But what I just did is something that Jordan Peterson seems to be incapable of doing, or doesn't realize he should be doing, or could be doing, or whatnot. People are confused when he gets into the "it depends by what you mean" space, and he never offers seemingly a good faith, like, iteration of what other people might think when they hear what he says. And so I think he ought to do that, so that he doesn't get in these in this trouble. And so, yeah, if I ever say "it depends by what you mean," hold me to that standard, please, because I think it's helpful for everyone involved. In Pluribus, though, she was dating the AI. Well, okay, yep. I don't blame her in that case. Yeah, I just feel like she should have asked more questions. She, you know, you have everything at your fingertip there. You could ask about, you know, secrets that the government might have had. You could ask about, you know, what perhaps you could eat. Like, you could ask the same questions we were just asking just now. Like, how should I sit for meditation? Yeah, it's like the same deal. Now, granted, the Pluribus AI does feel things, like it does understand what things feel like, or what the pepperoni actually tastes like. Though that's actually a little weird. I'm not sure if how Pluribus AI knows what a pepperoni tastes like, because everyone might have a different understanding of what pepperoni tastes like, or like different people thought pepperoni tasted good and bad. So, you know, now that they're all Pluribus, do they like all foods? Have they just gone to a state where they get the highest liking of all the people involved? It's actually very difficult to understand how in Pluribus the different people arrive at, like, a conclusion. Like, what is adjudicating opinions in Pluribus? Now, granted, they've arrived at this crazy position where they don't want to hurt anything, or not hurt anything. They don't want to farm anything, which is, like, very odd. Because, like, I don't think that's, like, a human... Like, I don't even think if we got all humans together we would agree on that. I don't think if we got the most... I don't think even Peter Singer would be down with that. You know? And that's, like, the most... You know, that'll be the most pragmatic, moral position, we'll just assume. Onion, what happened to the cookies? Oh, what was that talking about? Are you thinking of Jordan saying, rescue your father or whatever? I think Jordan's talking about some biblical event as opposed to the rescue the father thing. Though the rescue the father thing, you know, I feel like that is actually a concept that shows up a lot, and I think his connecting it to showing some reverence for culture, or for perhaps your genetics or whatever, is probably a nice way of going about it. So you want to rescue the knowledge you got from him? Oh, whose knowledge was this? But I do enjoy that mindset. I've heard it described as alchemical, that you have this energy from your past and you make use of it, transform it. Can AI be conscious in your view? AI cannot. Well, it depends by depends on what we mean by AI. I don't think that current AI models are conscious, certainly. And if they were conscious, it wouldn't be what we think of as consciousness. So, like, it might even be just inappropriate to call them conscious. Now the question is, do we end up building something that can be conscious in the same way that we are? And I would say it wouldn't be the same way that we are unless it was literally a... I mean, this is going to come down to the substrate problem, but like I'm betting on the substrate mattering. Therefore, I don't think you can recreate human consciousness unless you actually have a human body and brain. Now, you could potentially get rid of aspects of this conscious experience, but still keep something that we would consider as intuitively consider as a human experience if you were to like create digital like stand-ins, right? So like something like Neuralink is something akin to this, right? You've got like a digital stand-in that's affecting these other processes, but like could we get like we couldn't... Yeah, the question is like, what happens if you replace an amygdala with a digital version of it, right? Like a fake amygdala that can easily just output the right signals and input it expects the inputs. And I think, yeah, that's where like the substrate problem will really be solved once we can start doing that, because then we can really see like what aspects of experience people lose. But yeah, that's like my view currently based on, and that's all. Like it's not like my opinion as if it's like something I'm just kind of coming up with. I'm just giving you my honest understanding, or my honest understanding of what I think the neuroscience allows us to think. Like I think that's just like the implication of where we are with our current understanding of neuroscience and consciousness. Okay. Though, thank you for the question. Just for the summary machine, for the summary AI, make sure that when I ask for different things that I've set... Oh, actually, I should just use my my little marker. I forgot I had a marker here. But just in case I forget about the marker, make sure that I look at that clip as a possible thing to edit. All right. Hopefully it does that. All right. What next? What do we got going on? Okay. We're 2 hours in, so we could end at any point. But
your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable as what you're questioning.
Right. So like the issue that I find with Jordan is he's like using that as an excuse to not play around with what the person might be asking. Like he's saying like this is a reason why we can't even talk about this, and that I think is like a bad practice. Like it's a bad pragmatic practice. All right. What do you mean by mean? We got to get Heidegger in here. This is the semantic equivalent of turtles all the way down if you don't start providing possible ways of going about defining what you're talking about. Okay. When asked about the cookies. Very nice. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to be actually reading, I think, about Us versus Them. That's all I'm giving you. But actually I'll give you we're going to be reading the specific sections in Sapolsky's Behave about Us versus Them and how it is hardwired into our brains for the sake of adding that to our social drives here. So be prepared. It's actually somewhat dark, but it is something worth considering. Should we do anything else? Does anyone want to do anything else before I hop off here? Since it's a Friday fun day. Here we are at deep rationality and the economics of genetic survival. Translation of evolutionary biology into behavioral economics requires completely replacing the classical economic concept of utility maximization with the evolutionary imperative of fitness maximization. I don't know if we're going to like this. Traditional microeconomics assumes a purely rational actor operating in a vacuum seeking to maximize total expected wealth, subjective satisfaction, or overall consumption. This model assumes that utils, units of subjective value, are consistent across different domains of life. Conversely, the psychological framework of deep rationality posits that economic choices are governed by highly specialized domain-specific algorithms calibrated by natural selection to achieve a singular ultimate goal, getting genes into the next generation. Right, so this is like the ultimate goal, and it also depends like which genes, given the fact that like different parts of our brain or different parts of our brain and body are operating according to different subsets of genes. So like it's a very complex issue here, but we could consider this through like natural selection and the selfish genome, as Sapolsky said. These decision rules operate below conscious awareness and frequently lead to choices that appear irrational on a superficial financial level, but are profoundly rational when viewed through the lens of maximizing inclusive fitness and mitigating the risk of genetic extinction. Right, we got to get rid of this fitness word, though. Fitness makes it seem like we're just talking about survival in terms of being healthy in some like weird way, where really we would want to jump to the next thing up, the next level of abstraction up, which would be something like homeostasis, allostasis, body budgeting, all this stuff. Okay, I got a video. Oh wait, Connect 4 tournament. How do we do a Connect 4 tournament? I got a video. Can I play Connect 4 though I get the AI? A dude explaining the concept of stream entry. What is stream entry? What's your perspective on Lucas' critique on macroeconomics? All right, I just because we're talking about, just because the topic of economics came up, doesn't mean that we're actually wanting to stay on macroeconomics. I don't think we want to go into macroeconomics. This is pointing out that we aren't perfect economic models. We're not rational in the way that economic models think we are. Oh, loss aversion. Hell yeah. So now we're getting into the good stuff. Okay, I'll drop you into this part of the convo.
So you've mentioned stream entry before, and that's the first of those 4 levels of perceptual shifts, or stages of awakening, from the Buddhist Pali Canon. And could you talk a bit about what it's like to go through one of those shifts, and what are these aftershocks?
Yeah, so stream entry varies a lot depending on the person in terms of exactly what they experience after it. For some, there's not a lot of...
Is this a different interview, but the same guy? Oh, no. Okay, this is the guy that was in the other video with 4 people, I think, or 3 people, but maybe he was talking to this guy. I'm not sure.
Aftershocks. For some, it's just like a synchronizing and flipping out of attention, and then everything comes back, and there's a sense of mental reset, and they don't actually feel that different, although most people do, but there's a range. This is a stage that's easy to confuse for 2 previous insight stages. For anybody who's attempting to map this, that's a very, very strong warning. The vast majority of people who think they've gotten stream entry just crossed the arising and passing away, or got to some interesting thing happening in equanimity or some momentary formless realm or something else, and instead it wasn't stream entry. So, but of those who actually have gotten stream entry, there's a range of how people describe it. So the things you can count on are they will now naturally cycle. They can call up something sort of arising and passing away like, but a mild version just at a whim, just by inclining the mind to contemplate anything. They sit down in the arising and passing away, can rapidly drop down into dissolution, out into fear, misery, disgust, desire for deliverance, and many, once they've gotten a sense of how to use these capabilities, can then relatively quickly get to equanimity, and most will then learn how to get repeat fruition. So that cessation or fruition that happened there through what we call the 3 doors was where reality totally converges with an appreciation of either impermanence, suffering, or no self, or really a combination of those.
So this seems like expert level content. like this seems to be a place where, yeah, would you say there's a place that like we wouldn't be able to get to training 30 minutes a day? Like this is something that requires, you know, complete dedication.
Um,
30 minutes isn't bad. Okay. Okay.
So everything will either throw, disappear, reappear, that's impermanent store, or collapse in, zoop, where subject and object collapse into each other
Zoop.
totally, recognizing their essential nature. That's the no self door, or the entirety of reality, body, mind.
What is the
space,
question on
everything
your
moved
helmet?
Away from the sense of observer.
I have
And
an
that's
answer.
The suffering door, and these have some variants. You can read about them in the book. But the basic point is that once this has happened, it changes something about the brain. A stream enterer has different physiology, attentional physiology, insight physiology. They're not the same. And people will react to this differently. Some people will say things like, I now have this kind of permanent, like few millimeters of space around my thoughts that just is always there. Some people report radical reductions in anxiety.
So I guess to be clear, every time you meditate, you're changing your brain, you're changing the physiology of your brain. But this experience could be more profound in such a way where it has more noticeable changes. Okay, you know how you talk about culture and socialization. I've been thinking, like, where does culture and culture beliefs come from? Well, you can imagine culture as developing alongside evolution over a long period of time. So even like before we get to like culture, obviously like semantics, there was a lot of unarticulable aspects of culture in like movements and like whether or not we should be giving eye contact and stuff like that, and when we should be talking to other people. Obviously all this stuff is seemingly built in, you know, the like social hierarchy, but then there's also social hierarchy based on contextual clues. So like all this is cultural, of like what makes someone be more higher status or higher whatever, you know, what allows you to, like, when should you approach people, when should you talk to people, what types of things you should say. Like these are all things that you could imagine were developing over, you know, long periods of time before we were even human beings. That being said, there's the you know, there's, as we talked about earlier in the week, there's hypotheses about when our brain really changed significantly to allow for more complex culture because of the things that we found, like shells or depictions and stuff like that. So we can only kind of base our understanding off of what we find today, of like the trajectory of that culture and the complexity of it. But at all that entire development, there was still culture. It's just not what we usually think. It's a lot of the stuff that we don't really notice as aspects of culture. But yeah, that's continued to develop. And I mean, if you really want, we could read the section in that same book, the Behave book, where he goes through this as well, which I was pretty stoked about. And I probably highlighted some parts that I would want to incorporate into the document. Having deep end stuff really hooked me when I started practicing and motivated me. Hearing deep end stuff. So like hearing that these things are possible, like these deep things are possible to attain. It's funny thinking about that sound he just made, like that such an abstract experience would be possible to have a sound associated with it. Why is that? Yeah, that's maybe just past experiences. Like we've like a zip like that, like a zip, you know, something fast. Maybe it actually has something to do with when we hear similar types of experiences. I don't know. Humans are weird in how we like associate different information together.
Yeah, I know someone who's had a phobia disappear as a result of stream entry. I don't know why.
But that's much more general. How does it
reasons for
develop specifically?
some
like,
people
where does it
have
come from? Is
profound
it
insight and
disseminated
suddenly
from
their ability to
the
comprehend all
elites
kinds
or
of
the grassroots? Both. We kind of talked about this at one time, didn't we? Ask that very question. Yeah, it's this is a very messy situation where there's not like a clear cut algorithm of like what makes culture, but everyone's negotiating on culture all the time. When we're communicating with each other, and this all comes down to the experiences we have. You could drop it down to homeostasis and like social homeostasis, that we're all regulating each other for the sake of certain genes to go farther. And this type of group selection is such that we all get to go farther if we can associate in this type of way. We can behave in this type of way. But yeah, over time, it could be that different aspects of culture are affected by just the common folk talking, or it's disseminated from the elites. Obviously, the elites having certain powers can affect the culture in significant ways. That they are able to, in many cases, or probably in most cases over history, they're able to censor speech, or not. Censoring wouldn't even be the right word. Like, they're just literally constraining speech, and they are making it so that you're seeing certain things, or that you have access to certain types of goods. They have a significant effect on the trajectory of culture. But like, we can only speculate as to like, in certain scenarios, how much effect did they have versus how much effect did the common people have, how much effect did certain events have on the culture. Like, it's this stuff is so difficult to like really pin down, which is why we have the branch of history where people try to make sense of these things and try to explain what effects that has on the culture. To give an example, like, why does a large segment of society begin adopting a new religion? How does Rome just go from paganism to Christianity, and you get all of these people fervently defending Christianity now, for example? So this is we could also think about ideas as similarly undergoing a sort of evolution, where we can theorize that the ideas that come out at the end are salient for people. So if sometimes people change religion because they're dictated to do so. Sometimes people change religion because they've lost faith in the old one, but then there's a new faith that is salient because it was developed over long periods of time, like Christianity, and so they just have that to go to. And yeah, we'd have to ground it in like the social norms. So yeah, if a bunch of people in your family are into this religion, it's more likely that you'll get in the religion. We have to ground it in just people wanting to feel like their life is meaningful. Like, it really comes down to that. Or feel that their hardships have purpose, right? Like, you want to just be able to make sense of what's going on. That's really it. It's a deep embedded value, right? There's a music mixing technique where, to hear frequency bands better, you associate them with vowel sounds. Oo, ah, e all have spikes at certain frequencies due to filtering of the tongue and mouth. That blew my mind. Oh, I wonder if that's an effective technique for perfect pitch as well. I wonder. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I imagine there's a lot of cases where, making certain associations that are clear helps you out in discerning different aspects of your experience. I'm leaning much more to the idea that there's a sort of elite dissemination that crystallizes and canonizes cultural attitudes. Well, I would just suggest, like, or I would implore you to not simplify what's going on. Like, even if, let's just say, we found out somehow with some weird criteria that, like, the elites had 80% hold over the culture, like, we don't want to lose that 20%. And it wouldn't be 80% all the time. It's, like, fluctuating from, like, 60 to 80 or 90 or whatever. Like, we just don't know. So we don't want to simplify this. We don't want to be reductive about what's actually affecting culture over time. Because people do affect culture. Like, the very fact that a group of people that are in the working class can meet up and identify as a group is culture. Like, that is, all this is culture. And so, yeah, it depends by what we mean by culture. Are we only talking about like big ticket items of import, or are we talking about all culture, which would be any idea that people have, any experience of meaning that people feel? And yeah, it can be very much bottom up. You know, what caused revolutions? That's obviously a very culturally important event. So now you have to incorporate that the people had a bottom up effect on that. So, all right, I gotta call it on this topic. I'm feeling winded, and yeah, this was a good stream. Good fun stream. We get to do some more fun stuff tomorrow, aka we get to read through more of this and add to notes. Hopefully I'll have, maybe I'll read this stuff tomorrow morning and then add it and crystallize this, try to organize this document a little bit more. And yeah, once we get through these things, then maybe I just go straight to just crystallizing this document, making it clear, and maybe we get a video essay out of it. I'm not sure. Not out of the whole document. That would be way too long. What was the consciousness videos were like 19 pages. This is 29. So we got to just chill on. We would probably just want to do the evolutionary heuristic stuff, and then like maybe concrete biases. That would be cool. Not, we wouldn't care about habits for addiction. We wouldn't care about habits, strategies for these biases. Maybe we say that, maybe that's a follow-up video. All right. Thank you all for chilling. Thanks for giving content for us to watch and read. And yeah, thanks for all the lurkers, if there are any. And yeah, everyone have a good